The dance floor pulsed with drunk confidence, sweat already slicking Sarah's temples as she swayed against Walter Thorne. His hand, uninvited, settled on her lower back. Then his lips found her neck, just beneath her ear, a whisper that made her laugh, a sharp, brittle sound. My world, once solid, tilted. When she excused herself for the ladies' room and didn't return, I found her in the coat closet. Walter Thorne emerged first, adjusting his tie, a cruel smile on his face. Some things, he said, are just meant to be. I thought my life was built on bedrock, a foundation of quiet certainty. Dave Miller, a man who believed in steady work and predictable outcomes. Sarah and I met in a statistics class at the community college. An unlikely start for a love story, though I suppose numbers and probabilities have their own kind of romance. She had green eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and a laugh that felt warm and natural. I was the strong, silent type, they said. She was pretty and vivacious. It felt like a good match, like finding the right piece for a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was solving. I felt lucky to have her. Early on, there was a small resistance. Sarah hesitated when I pressed her to meet her parents, Frank and Martha Jensen. She muttered something about them being simple, living in a small house, nothing grand. I didn't care for grand. I insisted. When I finally met them, tucked away in an older part of town with mature trees lining the streets, I understood. Their house was modest, yes, but immaculate, filled with the smell of brewing coffee and faint lemon polish. Frank, a retired mechanic, shook my hand firmly. Martha, with her apron and gentle smile, offered me a plate of cookies before I'd even sat down. They were salt-of-the-earth, genuine people. I grew to love them like my own late parents, finding solace in their quiet strength and straightforward kindness. My career took off with a steady upward trajectory. I started as a staff accountant at a medium-sized manufacturing firm, tracing numbers through ledger sheets, reconciling accounts, ensuring everything balanced. It was precise work, demanding but satisfying. Over the next few years, I moved up, eventually becoming the head of the department. The six-figure salary felt good, a testament to my hard work and dedication. Sarah seemed happy with the money, the new house in the suburbs, the comforts it bought. The work itself, the grind, that was my burden to carry. She just enjoyed the rewards. Then the twins arrived, Susie and Tom. Sarah had initially resented the pregnancy, talking about travel plans we would have to postpone, dreams of seeing different coasts. But once they were here, tiny and demanding, she became a good mother. She juggled bottles and diapers with surprising grace, her earlier complaints fading into the background of lullabies and baby coos. I watched her proud, believing this was the life we had built, strong and true. When Susie and Tom started kindergarten, Sarah insisted on getting a job. She said she felt stifled at home, wanted something more. She landed an administrative assistant role at a law firm downtown. The environment unsettled me a little. Lawyers seemed a different breed, sharp-edged and often cynical. I voiced my worries, but she brushed them off. "It's fine, Dave. My boss, Walter Thorne, he's an older guy, devoted to his family. Just needs someone organized." He even met me once, a quick handshake, his smile a little too smooth. He seemed a perfectly respectable man. I let my guard down. The shift in Sarah was gradual, subtle, like the slow creep of shadows across a lawn. It started in our 6th year of marriage. She became withdrawn, her green eyes often distant. The natural light seemed to dim around her. She snapped at the kids, a sharp tone I'd never heard her use before. The house grew quieter. I tried to talk to her, but she'd just sigh, say she was tired. The silence was heavier than any argument. One evening, Susie, only 7, forgot her plate on the table. It was a small thing, easily fixed. But Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "Susie, how many times?" Susie's lower lip trembled. I stepped in, my own voice firm. "Sarah, it's all right. I'll get it." Sarah turned on me, her face pale. The anger evaporated, replaced by something raw and desperate. She broke down, right there in the kitchen, leaning against the cold granite counter. Her words were quiet, but they tore through the quietness of our home. "I'm just so unhappy, Dave. I feel like my life is passing me by. I just want to live a better life." I suggested counseling, gently, carefully. Her reaction was immediate, hostile. Counseling? What, you think I'm crazy? Is that it? She stalked off, leaving me standing in the silence, Susie's wide, fearful eyes fixed on me. Weeks of tension followed, punctuated by brief, almost jarring returns of the Sarah I knew. A shared laugh, a soft touch. I held on to those moments, dismissed the dark spells as a rough patch. For better or worse, that was the vow. I spent extra time with Susie and Tom, reading them stories, helping with homework, shielding them from their mother's unpredictable moods. I'd reassure them, Mommy loves you very much, she's just tired. The company's 4th of July picnic brought a fleeting improvement. Sarah laughed with the other wives, her mood lightened by the sun and the cheerful noise. For a few hours, things felt normal again. I allowed myself to hope. New Year's Eve arrived, cold and crisp. Sarah usually preferred to stay home, to put on a movie, maybe a quiet dinner. But this year, she surprised me. Dave, she said, her voice unusually bright, I think I want to go to your company party tonight. I feel like dancing. It was odd, but I agreed. The New Year's Eve party at the Grand Ballroom felt different this year. Less of the usual corporate schmoozing and more like an actual celebration. Or perhaps that was just Sarah's presence. What truly caught my attention, though, was the unexpected sight of Russell Shaw. The company owner rarely showed up for anything beyond the annual 4th of July picnic. He was a man who preferred the golf course to a crowded dance floor. Yet there he was, resplendent in a tuxedo. Almost immediately, Russell made a beeline for Sarah. He extended a hand, a charming smile on his face, and asked her to dance. Sarah, usually reserved in these settings, giggled and accepted. I watched from the edge of the room, 2 glasses of punch in my hands, as he monopolized her for the next 3 songs. They moved well together, their laughter carrying over the music. A flicker of unease, cold and sharp, touched my gut. When the music finally slowed and they separated, I approached. My turn, I think, I said, offering a hand to Sarah. She hesitated, a faint blush on her cheeks. Oh, Dave, I'm a little tired, honestly. My feet are killing me. Before I could respond, Russell was there again, a hand on her elbow. Nonsense, Sarah. Just one more slow dance for the road, surely. She looked at him, then at me, and a smile, a little too bright, spread across her face. All right, Russell, just one. They rejoined the dancers, leaving me standing alone with 2 forgotten drinks. This pattern, I noticed, repeated itself throughout the night. Russell seemed to materialize every time Sarah was free, cutting in or simply reappearing to ask her to dance. Each time she accepted. The knot in my stomach tightened, cold and heavy. I observed Sarah's face, flushed and animated, her laughter a little too loud. There was a spark in her eyes, a vivacity I hadn't seen in her for years, not since before the twins, perhaps. It was alarming, like watching a stranger wear my wife's face. As the clock ticked towards midnight, signaling the new year, the music swelled and everyone counted down. Sarah was dancing with Russell again. When the final chime struck, they embraced briefly, along with everyone else around them. But as they pulled apart, their eyes locked. It was a long, lingering look, not a quick glance of congratulations, but something deeper, something charged with an unspoken understanding. I caught it across the milling crowd, and in that instant, I recognized it. It was a look that transcended professional courtesy, something intimate, almost clandestine. My blood ran cold. The next morning, Sarah was unusually cheerful. She hummed as she made coffee, her movements light, a stark contrast to the withdrawn, snapping woman she'd been for months. She talked animatedly about the party, about the music, the good food. She mentioned Russell Shaw, too, but only in passing as a really good dancer. I tried to dismiss the unease, the image of her and Russell, but it persisted, a grainy photograph stuck behind my eyelids. Then the excuses started. Sarah began finding reasons to stay late at work or to go out in the evenings. New friends from the firm, Dave, we're going for drinks after work, she'd say. Or, there's a late-night project, I need to stay and help Walter. I'd call the office after dinner just to check on her, and the phone would ring unanswered. Later, I'd learned most of these new friends were largely fabricated, or the late-night projects never happened. Her appearance changed too. She paid more attention to her hair, started wearing new clothes, silks and softer fabrics I hadn't seen before. Things she usually said were too much. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always with her, often turned face down. She'd take it with her to the bathroom, to the basement laundry room. Her conversations on it became hushed, her voice dropping whenever I entered the room. One evening, I was walking past the spare bedroom, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. The door was ajar. I heard Sarah's voice, low and intense. "He knows, I think." "No, he can't. But it's risky. What about our secret?" My heart seized in my chest. Him. Our secret. As I reached the doorway, she evidently heard my footsteps. The phone clicked shut immediately. She turned, her eyes wide, a forced smile on her lips. "Just talking to Brenda from work," she said too quickly, too brightly. I started feeling like a detective in my own home, noticing small, unsettling details. A subtle scent of an unfamiliar cologne on her pillow one morning. A misplaced receipt for an expensive dinner I hadn't attended. Her evasiveness, a constant wall of vagueness whenever I asked about her day. "Oh, same old," she'd say, her eyes flitting away. My gut churned constantly, a sickening feeling that something fundamental had shifted, something dark and dangerous. I remembered the Bible verse my father used to quote, "Time and chance happen to all." I wondered if this was my time for ill fortune, for the ground beneath me to crack and give way. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The evidence, thin as it was mounting. I needed to know the truth. The gnawing suspicion inside me became a living thing, a cold presence that coiled in my gut. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I started to investigate quietly, like a shadow in my own life. I used Sarah's work schedule as a starting point. She would mention a late night, a big project at the firm. I'd make an excuse to drive by the office on my way home, just to confirm. Sometimes her car was there. Often it wasn't. The discrepancy widened the cracks in my carefully constructed world. Then a bolder move. As head of accounting, I had access to certain company systems, including executive calendars. It wasn't ethical, but ethics felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I checked Russell Shaw's schedule. There it was, in plain black and white, a pattern I couldn't deny. Overlapping out-of-office entries, often marked simply as personal appointment, coinciding precisely with Sarah's late work nights. The pieces clicked into place, cold and sharp. One Tuesday evening, the sky was a bruised purple and a thin, relentless rain had begun to fall. Sarah had left the office early, telling me she was meeting Brenda for dinner, a girls' night. A lie, I knew it. My hands were slick with sweat, despite the chill in the air as I drove past the law firm. Her car wasn't there. I parked a few blocks away and waited. When she emerged, she wasn't alone. Walter Thorne was with her, carrying a briefcase, his usual earnest demeanor. They exchanged a few words, a polite wave. Then Sarah walked briskly to her car, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. I followed, maintaining a careful distance, the wipers of my sedan slapping a rhythmic beat against the windshield. She didn't head home. She drove towards the wealthier part of town, an area of high-end boutiques and exclusive restaurants. She pulled into the valet parking of the Gilded Spoon, a place where the entrees cost more than my work boots. It was far from our usual haunts, far from Brenda's rumored favorite Italian place. I found a spot across the street, near a dark alleyway, and watched. Through the rain-streaked window, under the soft glow of the restaurant's interior lights, I saw her. And him. Russell Shaw was already seated, waiting. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair. He was smiling, that same smooth, confident smile from the New Year's party. I watched them, my heart a dull, rhythmic drum against my ribs. They held hands across the table. Their heads were close, almost touching, as they talked. Sarah laughed, that same intimate, sparkling laugh I'd seen before, a laugh she hadn't given me in years. I waited, a statue in my car, the rain drumming a steady tattoo on the roof. The meal seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, they rose. They left the restaurant together, walking close, Russell's hand subtly on her lower back. He opened the passenger door of his expensive European sedan, and she slid in. I watched as he got behind the wheel, pulled out, and drove away. I followed again, a ghost in the rain. They drove to a luxury apartment building, a sleek tower of glass and steel, not far from the restaurant. I watched them disappear into the lobby, two figures swallowed by the gleaming automatic doors. My darkest fears, the ones I had pushed down, rationalized away, were now standing solid and undeniable. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the familiar ground under my feet suddenly uncertain, crumbling. I drove home in a daze, the Midwestern night feeling colder, the familiar streets now alien, each turn a twist of a knife. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as if trying to hold on to something solid, something real. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound in the suffocating silence of the car. Back home, the house was dark and still. I walked through the quiet rooms, each step heavy. I checked on the kids, Susie and Tom, asleep in their beds, their faces peaceful, innocent. The weight of Sarah's betrayal settled on my chest, a crushing burden that stole the air from my lungs. How could she? I spent the night staring at the ceiling, the shadows of the fan blades spinning a slow, hypnotic pattern. Every moment replayed in my mind. Every lie, every evasive answer, every stolen glance at the New Year's party. The unfamiliar cologne, the hushed phone call, the way she laughed. I thought of Frank and Martha Jensen, their kindness, their simple, honest lives. The shame of what Sarah had done, the betrayal not just of me, but of the values they stood for, felt like a burning brand. How could she do this to them? To us? A profound emptiness washed over me, a void where my trust and love had once resided. But beneath it, a cold, simmering rage, a feeling I'd never known, began to build. My life as I knew it was over. The quiet, comfortable existence I had built, piece by careful piece, shattered. Sarah needed to know. The confrontation was coming, inevitable and terrifying. The house was dark, save for the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the living room window. I sat on the sofa, unmoving, the cold leather chilling my skin. The clock on the mantel ticked with unnatural loudness. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the subtle click of the garage door, then the soft tread of footsteps. Sarah was trying to sneak in. The front door opened and closed with a cautious whisper. She moved through the entryway, silent, intent on her deception. When she entered the living room, I spoke. "Where have you been, Sarah?" My voice was low, steady, betraying none of the turmoil that raged beneath the surface. It was a cold, flat sound, like a stone skipping across ice. She gasped, startled, stumbling slightly. The faint light caught her face, already pale. "Dave, what are you doing? You scared me." She fumbled for an excuse, her words catching in her throat. "Just out with a friend, I told you. Brenda and I had a late dinner. You know how it gets." Her voice trailed off, the lie dying in the air, sensing the unyielding demeanor that had replaced my usual patience. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Brenda doesn't drive a European sedan, Sarah, and she doesn't live in the Gilded Spoons restaurant or Russell Shaw's luxury apartment building." I laid out the facts, calmly, precisely, each word a hammer blow. Her car not being at the office. The overlapping calendar entries. The restaurant, the hand-holding, the apartment building. I didn't shout. There was no need. The facts spoke for themselves. Her face drained of color, going ashen in the dim light. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She tried denial first, a weak, "What are you talking about, Dave? That's ridiculous." Then deflection. "You've been so distant, so busy with your work. You don't understand, Dave." Then with a sudden surge of anger, she tried to blame me for her unhappiness. "You don't understand what I've been going through. My life felt so small, so trapped." "I understand enough," I said, my voice like cold stone. "I understand that you betrayed me. You betrayed our children. You lied." The argument escalated, not with shouts, but with the painful unraveling of years of assumed trust. Sarah dissolved into tears, hot and desperate, then flared into anger, accusing me of stifling her, of not seeing her, then back to tears, confessing bits and pieces. The loneliness, the attention from Russell, the spark, but never the full truth, never admitting the depth of her deceit. It was like watching someone try to patch a gaping wound with scraps of paper. A wrenching pain twisted in my chest. This woman, sobbing and screaming and deflecting, was a stranger. The person I had loved, built a life with, was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. The silence in the house, once a comfort, a sign of peace, now felt deafening, amplifying the hollow ache inside me. "What about Russell Shaw?" I demanded, cutting through her pleas. "Is it serious?" She hesitated, her eyes darting away, then back. A single choked sob escaped her. "Yes," she whispered, the word a cruel twist of the knife. "Yes, I love him, Dave. He understands me." I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't breathe the same air. The air was thick with her lies, with his cologne, with the wreckage of our life. "Pack a bag," I said, my voice hoarse, devoid of emotion. "You can't stay here. Get out. Tonight." She was shocked by my resolve, by the finality in my tone. "Dave, no, please. Think of the kids. We can't do this to them. Not tonight. We can talk in the morning." She made a desperate plea, her voice raw with panic. "Let's just keep this quiet for Susie and Tom." "You should have thought of the kids," I said, turning my back to her, staring at the dark window. The reflection showed nothing but my own pale, drawn face. There was nothing more to say. Sarah stumbled out of the living room, her sobs echoing faintly as she moved through the house. I heard drawers opening and closing, the rustle of clothes. She packed a small bag, probably just enough for a night or a week. I heard her pause outside Susie and Tom's closed bedroom doors, a soft, broken whimper escaping her lips. Finally, the front door opened, then clicked shut with a desolate finality. She was gone. I stood there in the dark, feeling a strange mix of utter devastation and grim determination. The house felt empty, yet also clean, purged of a toxic presence. My hand found the phone. I needed to tell someone. I needed support. I knew the call would cause them pain, but they deserved to know. I dialed Frank and Martha Jensen's number. It was late, but they would answer. They always did. The call to Frank and Martha Jensen was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Their initial silence was more devastating than any shout. Then Martha's soft cry, Frank's low, rumbling voice asking me to confirm. "Are you sure, David? Our Sarah?" The shame in their voice was palpable, mixed with profound heartbreak. But there was also an immediate, unwavering wave of support for me. "You always were like a son, David. We're here for you." It was a small, cold comfort in a world gone suddenly dark. Breaking the news to Susie and Tom was a different kind of agony. I sat them down, the two of them small and trusting, their faces open. I explained that Mommy needed some time away, that she was going to live somewhere else for a while. I shielded them carefully from the harsh, ugly truth of betrayal, painting it as a difficult decision, not a devastating one. "Mommy still loves you very much," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. They were confused, of course, and deeply sad. Susie clung to my leg, her small voice asking, "Is Mommy mad at us?" Tom, ever the quieter one, just stared at the floor, his bottom lip trembling. Their innocent questions tore at my heart, each one a fresh wound. I promised them I would always be there, that nothing would change my love for them. It was a vow I knew I would keep, even if the rest of my life was falling apart. Numb but resolute, I began the practical steps of separation. I couldn't afford to falter. A colleague had once mentioned a lawyer, a woman named Elaine Sterling, known for being tough and fair in these small-town divorces. I called her office first thing the next morning. She advised me on child custody, protecting my assets, the intricacies of divorce in this state. I was meticulous, gathering every document, every detail, building my case like I built a spreadsheet at work. Precise, irrefutable. I also reached out to Arthur Finch, my longtime department manager, a man who had been a mentor to me for years. Arthur was a steady hand, a man of quiet integrity. I needed his counsel, not just as a friend, but for insights into Russell Shaw's ethics and business practices. I told him everything, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Arthur listened, his face hardening, his shock and disgust evident. "Russell Shaw, of all people," he muttered, shaking his head. He offered quiet support, yes, but also invaluable insights into the company owner's vulnerabilities. Hints about some questionable business dealings he'd heard whispered in the upper echelons. Nothing major, on the surface, but small things that could become major problems if scrutinized closely, if a light was shone on them. A cold clarity settled over me. This wouldn't just be a divorce. It would be a path of strategic exposure, a pursuit of justice. I was determined to make Russell and Sarah face the full cost of their actions, not just the emotional one, but the tangible public consequences. I began documenting everything, every financial transaction, every communication from Sarah, every detail that could be relevant to my case. I knew the moral burden of what I was doing, the cold calculation of it, but it wasn't just revenge. It was about principle. It was about protecting my children from the fallout of their mother's reckless choices. Sarah called me, her voice tearful, pleading. She claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that she loved me, that she wanted to come home. Please, Dave, we can fix this. For the kids. My resolve, forged in the fires of betrayal, was unmoved. It's too late for that, Sarah. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Then Russell Shaw made his move. He called me directly, his tone smooth, almost apologetic. He'd heard about the difficulties, understood I was going through a tough time. He offered a significant severance package, more than generous, if I would just step aside quietly from the company, a bribe thinly veiled. Some things aren't for sale, Mr. Shaw, I said, my voice cold, the phone clicking dead in my hand. His offer only reinforced my path. It signaled his fear and my unwavering resolve. I knew the road ahead would be brutal. The quiet comfort of my life was gone, replaced by a battlefield of legal documents and emotional scars. But there was a deep, quiet strength growing inside me now, forged in the ashes of my broken trust. I had to see this through for Susie and Tom, for myself. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. I initiated the legal proceedings with a cold, almost surgical precision. Divorce, sole custody. My lawyer Elaine laid out the arguments, citing Sarah's abandonment of the marital home and her reckless behavior as primary grounds. It was a formal, sterile process, yet each document felt like a fresh cut, severing another tie to the life I once knew. Concurrently, I made another move. Discreetly, anonymously, I reached out to a trusted contact in the industry, someone who knew the ins and outs of corporate compliance. I shared the information I had gathered about Russell Shaw's questionable business dealings, framing it as a concern from a diligent observer. No names, no direct accusations, just enough detail to light a fuse. Let the investigation follow its own course. Word travels fast in a small town, especially in the connected business community. Whispers about Russell Shaw's affair with Sarah began to ripple through the company. The polite smiles turned to speculative glances. The casual conversations paused when I entered a room. I could feel the shift, the judgment in the air. Sarah found herself isolated. Her reputation, once intact, was now damaged goods. Walter Thorne, her boss at the law firm, was a devout Christian, a man who tolerated no fooling around in his personal or professional sphere. When the rumors reached him, he acted swiftly. Sarah lost her administrative assistant job. Another consequence, cold and immediate. Russell Shaw, too, began to face the heat. The anonymous tip, coupled with the escalating rumors about the affair, brought internal scrutiny from his board. External pressures mounted as investors, concerned about his judgment and the company's reputation, started asking uncomfortable questions. His carefully constructed image as a pillar of the community, a successful family man, began to crack, showing the rot beneath. Meanwhile, at home, the children struggled. Susie, usually so bright, grew quieter, her drawings filled with dark, empty spaces. Tom, once full of boisterous energy, became withdrawn, asking if Mommy would ever come back for good. They heard whispers at school, the cruel taunts of children, repeating adult gossip. It tore at me. I worked harder than ever to maintain their stability, to be present, to reassure them with a constant, unwavering love. Their world had shattered, and I was the only one left to piece it back together. Sarah, now desperate and financially strained without her job, tried to fight me on custody. She hired her own lawyer, a young, inexperienced man who seemed out of his depth. But her actions spoke louder than any legal arguments. Her abandonment of the children, her consistent prioritization of Russell over them, made her case weak, almost indefensible. I didn't have to lie. I simply presented the court with the undeniable evidence of her deceit and neglect. My lawyer laid it out, cold and factual. The late nights, the fabricated excuses, the times she left the children with babysitters while she was with him. Then came the news. Russell's business dealings were under official investigation, not just an internal review, but a government agency looking into the books. It was partly my doing, my discreet actions finally bearing fruit. The company's future, once so robust, was now in jeopardy. I felt a hollow victory watching the unraveling of their lives. It didn't bring back what I lost. It didn't heal the pain or erase the memories. It was just an ending, a necessary one. Sarah confronted me, her face streaked with tears and fury, outside the courthouse one afternoon. "You're destroying everything, Dave," she spat, her voice raw. "You're destroying our family, our children's future." She blamed me for her downfall, for the loss of her job, for the public humiliation. I looked at her, my gaze steady. "You chose to destroy it, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, unwavering. "I'm just holding you accountable." There was no satisfaction in my words, only the cold, hard truth. The emotional toll on me was immense. The sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the battle between my desire for justice and the guilt of inflicting pain on the mother of my children. But I pushed through, driven by a fierce, unyielding need for integrity, for my children, for myself. Frank and Martha Jensen were my bedrock. They offered to help with the children, providing a stable, loving environment whenever I needed a break, whenever I had to be in court. They cooked meals, listened to the children's fears, stood by me without question. The divorce proceedings dragged on, an agonizing public spectacle. Each hearing, each motion, was another step through the wreckage. But I refused to back down. The legal battles intensified, each court date another grueling skirmish. Sarah's lawyer, grasping at straws, tried to paint me as a vindictive husband, driven by spite, destroying her life out of pure malice. They brought up old arguments, twisted casual remarks, attempted to find any flaw in my character. It was an ugly, desperate fight. But Elaine, my lawyer, was methodical. She systematically dismantled their arguments, presenting a clear, unassailable narrative. Sarah's consistent abandonment of the children, her fabricated excuses, the financial records, the timeline of her affair with Russell Shaw, and Russell's predatory behavior, his calculated seduction of a married employee. It wasn't about character assassination, it was about documented fact. Meanwhile, the investigation into Russell Shaw's company deepened, fueled by the anonymous tip and the subsequent paper trail. Public financial disclosures began to emerge, revealing significant irregularities. Minor accounting discrepancies that, when scrutinized, exposed a pattern of questionable practices, of corner-cutting and creative bookkeeping. Russell Shaw's carefully constructed world started to crumble. His reputation, once unblemished, became tainted. His wealth tied up in the company took a massive hit as major clients, wary of scandal and instability, began pulling out. Investors grew nervous, the stock price dipped, and the whispers turned into a roar. He was a man cornered, and his smooth confidence began to crack under the pressure. Sarah, now almost entirely reliant on Russell, faced the brunt of his unraveling. Their love story, born in the glow of stolen moments, turned sour under the harsh glare of reality and financial duress. The idyllic fantasy they'd built could not withstand the weight of real-world consequences. I heard through the grapevine that their arguments were becoming frequent, loud. Even Susie and Tom were brought into court. My lawyer argued it was essential to understand the children's daily lives. Their testimony, quiet and innocent, about their mother's extended absences, about their father being the one who always read them bedtime stories, who helped with homework, who cooked their meals, weighed heavily on the proceedings. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. It showed my constant presence against Sarah's glaring absence. I endured personal attacks, my own character questioned, my motivations scrutinized. The public scrutiny was relentless. My name and face splashed across local news outlets, a symbol of a wronged husband. It felt like I was being dissected, exposed. But my resolve remained unshaken. It was fueled by a desire to protect my children, to secure their future, to shield them from further harm. This was not just my fight, it was theirs. Then I discovered another layer of betrayal. Sarah, in a desperate attempt to gain an advantage, had secretly begun attempting to drain our joint savings accounts, trying to move money into an account only she could access. It was a blatant act of theft. My lawyer moved swiftly, securing an immediate court order to freeze all joint assets. This financial move left Sarah completely isolated and dependent, with no resources of her own. It fueled her anger, yes, but also her resentment towards me, turning her rage into a weapon she would try to use against me. There were moments late at night when doubt would creep in. Was the cost of this fight too high? The emotional toll, the financial drain, the relentless public exposure. Was it worth it? Then I would look at Susie and Tom, asleep in their beds, their small, trusting faces illuminated by the nightlight. And in those moments, my purpose was reaffirmed. This wasn't just about me. Frank and Martha Jensen continued to be my steadfast anchors. They were there for the kids, for me, offering meals, taking the children for weekends, just sitting and listening. Their loyalty was a balm on a raw wound, a reminder of what true family meant. Russell Shaw, cornered by the mounting legal and financial pressure, made one last desperate attempt. He reached out to my lawyer, then directly to me, offering a significant sum, millions, if I would drop the business investigations, if I would just disappear from his life. Think about your children, Dave, he'd said, his voice no longer smooth but edged with panic. I rejected the offer again. This isn't about money for me, Mr. Shaw, I said, my voice flat. It's about principle. It's about accountability. The media, always hungry for scandal, caught wind of the high-profile affair and the subsequent business collapse. It splashed across local headlines, a cautionary tale, a sordid drama. I prepared for the final, decisive court hearings. The end was near, I knew, but the scars, deep and indelible, would remain. The day the court delivered its verdict felt less like a victory and more like an exhale after holding my breath for months. The judge, a stern woman with weary eyes, spoke with a clear, deliberate cadence. Dave Miller was granted sole custody of Susie and Tom. Sarah would receive limited supervised visitation, deemed necessary given her history of abandonment and lack of consistent involvement. Justice, in the cold legal sense, had been served. Sarah's reaction was immediate and visceral. She crumpled, a choked sob tearing from her throat, her face a mask of shock and despair. In that moment, the full extent of her loss hit her. Her marriage, her children, her reputation, all laid bare and irrevocably damaged. She looked at me, her eyes accusing, but there was a flicker of something else there too, a dawning realization of the desolate landscape she had created for herself. Meanwhile, the repercussions for Russell Shaw were swift and brutal. His company, exposed for its financial irregularities, was forced into receivership. His public disgrace was absolute, plastered across local and national business pages. He lost his immense fortune, his business, his social standing, everything he had built on a foundation of shaky ethics. And in his destitution, he lost Sarah too. She who had pursued him for his lifestyle abandoned him when he had nothing left, her love proving as shallow as his promises. I observed Sarah's downfall from a distance, watching her become a shadow of her former self, her vibrant energy replaced by a defeated slump. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing the consequences of their actions, a sense that the scales had finally balanced. But it was tinged with a deep, pervasive sadness. This wasn't the kind of ending anyone deserved, least of all the children. I realized that while justice had been served, the emotional cost had been astronomical. For me, for Sarah, for Russell, but most of all for Susie and Tom. They had been shielded, yes, but the drama, the fractured family, the whispers from classmates, it all left its mark. Susie often asked if her mother was fixed yet. Tom started having nightmares. I dedicated myself to their healing, to rebuilding a sense of safety and normalcy in our quiet home. I found a new, almost ascetic solace in my work, in the quiet routine of fatherhood. Making breakfast, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, these small, ordinary acts became my anchors. I was rebuilding piece by careful piece, not the life I had, but a new one, stronger perhaps, more resilient. I reflected on my journey, the transformation from a trusting husband, content in his predictable world, to a hardened survivor, carrying the weight of experience like an invisible burden. The man I was before the affair felt like a ghost, a distant memory. Frank and Martha Jensen remained a constant source of love and stability. They visited often, their quiet presence a comfort. Martha cooked, Frank played with the kids. They were more important than ever, a tangible link to a past that still held moments of genuine joy. I recognized that my winning in court didn't equate to happiness. It was merely the cessation of conflict, the end of a war, leaving behind scarred terrain. Happiness felt like a distant country I might never truly reach again. One afternoon, I drove past our old house, the one Sarah and I had bought together. It was quiet, empty, the for sale sign a stark marker. Memories flooded back. The kids' first steps in the living room, Sarah's laughter in the kitchen. It was a bittersweet end of an era, a final farewell to a dream that had died. I grappled with the morality of my actions. Was my pursuit of justice truly right? Or had it simply perpetuated more pain? A chain reaction of destruction? I couldn't be sure. The lines felt blurred, the moral landscape complex and unforgiving. But I understood the phrase "pay the price now" with profound clarity. Everyone involved, myself included, had paid. The cost was exacted in lost trust, shattered innocence, and ruined lives. A quiet determination settled over me to move forward, not to forget the past, but to allow it to shape a stronger, more resilient future for my family. We would carry the scars, but we would also carry the lessons. Years passed, marked by school calendars and the steady growth of my children. I dedicated myself entirely to Susie and Tom, focusing on their stability, their small joys, their sometimes difficult questions. They grew tall, their laughter filling the house, a sound different from before, yet just as precious. They became resilient, thoughtful teenagers, still carrying the echoes of their past, but thriving under a consistent, unwavering love. Frank and Martha Jensen remained a constant, their Sunday dinners a fixed point in our changing world. They were a vital link, a reminder that not all connections from that side of the family were lost. Sarah occasionally tried to reach out to the children, but her infrequent, self-pitying contact offered little comfort or real connection. She was a distant figure, a memory that faded with each passing year. Russell Shaw disappeared from the public eye completely, his name becoming a hushed cautionary tale in the business community. His downfall was absolute. I grew older, perhaps wiser, finding a new sense of peace in the quiet rhythms of my life. Cherishing the small moments with my children, the mundane rituals, became my greatest comfort. That old verse, "Time and chance happen to all," took on new meaning. I understood that even in despair, there was always a chance for renewal, a quiet unfolding of possibility. Eventually, a gentle, understanding woman entered my life. She respected my past, loved my children, and I approached love with caution, a new kind of slow patience. I continued to work at the same firm, now a respected veteran, my quiet strength and integrity well known. The permanent scars of the betrayal remained, a part of the landscape, but so did an unexpected resilience, a depth I hadn't known I possessed. The small Midwestern town, once the backdrop for my domestic tragedy, slowly became a place of quiet healing and new beginnings. I taught Susie and Tom about forgiveness, not for the sake of forgetting, but for their own peace of mind. I learned to let go of the anger, transforming it into a quiet wisdom that guided my decisions. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was Midwestern realism, a hard-won peace built on honesty and perseverance. I looked out over my quiet life, a sense of quiet gratitude for the love that remained and the profound lessons learned from the storm.